What all biomolecules we have already done? Tell me quickly, children. What categories have you already covered?
Ma'am, carbohydrates and amino acids.
Yes, carbohydrates and amino acids. Because you have just studied about amino acids, so I've taken the next related kind of amino acid. I mean, the next kind of biomolecule. That is what? That's proteins. But before I go to this, let me have a very quick attendance first. Akash, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, beta. Ananya,
Yes, ma'am.
Ariba,
Present, ma'am.
Dushti,
Present, ma'am.
Ayush Gupta, Invisible Man, Ayush Gupta, are you there? Mansi,
Yes, ma'am.
Sanvi.
Present, ma'am.
Sanvi, these days you're not regular for your classes. What happened, beta?
I'm
Tabiat
actually,
kharab
I'm
thi
not
na?
well.
Not well.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Eye strain and I have fever, so I'm not able to attend it regularly.
Oh, that is what we were guessing, me and Surbi ma'am yesterday, because you're very regular. So we were guessing the same thing, that maybe she's not well. Fever, beta, take care. Soham, are you there, bache? Soham Ahuja, are you there? Good morning, present. Chaliye, next is Soni Sharma.
Present, ma'am.
Chaliye, she's also there. Uditi,
Present, ma'am.
Vedehi.
Present, ma'am.
Vedehi, you're not taking your literature classes. Surbi ma'am has a lot of issues. What happened? Not going for classes?
Yes,
What's
ma'am.
wrong? Not
English
taking
literature
drill or
classes
something?
are
You're
not.
not regular for your English classes. What happened? Principal sir will be calling now for LOC signatures. Your parents have to go. This week only you will be called with your parents. Any day, it could be Thursday, Friday, any day. So beta, these issues will certainly crop up that day when you go to sign your LOC. All the teachers would be there, and then these issues will certainly come up as to so and so subject classes you're attending, you're not attending. Are you regularly attending your physics chemistry classes?
Yes, ma'am. Physics, chemistry, and bio I'm regularly attending.
That is the reason, no? That is the complaint basically. Okay, Anshika has also joined. Let me write her name also. So we got Anshika here. Chalo. Never
Good
mind. Those
morning,
who
ma'am.
joined. Good morning. Who else has joined? Whose name I did not
Ma'am,
read?
Prabha.
Prabha. Prabha has also joined us. Prabha, बीच में बेटा आप भी रेगुलर हो गए थे. Please be regular now. Now it's fine.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, Anshika. Hi.
Ma'am, in bio or ma'am, in which class you think?
English.
Ma'am, English, I'm regular, ma'am.
Why do you people generally come? There are only very few students in biology, new admissions who don't come. There is one boy,
But in
Aryan, right?
English, I regularly attend.
Literature, are you attending?
Yes, ma'am.
Literature classes, do you attend?
Yes, ma'am.
Chalo, don't do, you are saved. You will not have any
Excuse
problem.
me, ma'am.
Yes, beta.
Ma'am, I joined the literature class a few days back. She asked me to leave the meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
When I didn't leave the meeting, she removed me.
But why did ma'am tell you to leave the meeting?
She said that you are not regular in the classes, so I'm removing you. At that day, I thought from now that I will attend the classes, but she didn't allow me to attend the classes.
We really need to be concerned because now LOC signatures thing is coming up. So these issues will certainly come up. Somebody has just joined. Who is it? I need to write your name, child. Who is it? Just now, who joined? Srishti. Okay, Srishti, you were there already.
Ma'am, actually I joined with my laptop. I was having
Acha, acha.
issues
Okay, there was
regarding
some
this.
difference. Chalo, that's okay. Chaliye beta. The people will keep joining later. We'll continue with our work. We have already
Ma'am,
discussed biomolecules. Yes, bache Mansi.
ma'am, LOC signatures.
हाँ beta, principal sir will be posting a message on your class groups maybe tomorrow. You have to go to sign your LOC roll number wise. He'll be calling you slots. He will give roll number this to this time to this time. So you have to come with your parents to sign the LOC. It's absolutely mandatory. Otherwise, your board registration for class 12 will not be done. So you need to
Okay,
come
ma'am.
to school. Okay.
So, ma'am, if you're not attending the classes, any problem will come?
Teachers will be there. That is the main reason why students are being called with the parents. That teachers will be there. Some issues regarding attendance have to be discussed. Principal sir said very clearly that I want these facts to be discussed with the parents in case the child is not regular. So maybe some minor issues will come up, but let's see. Acha, Ayush Gupta is
Excuse me,
saying
ma'am.
his mic is not working. He has messaged me, Ayush Gupta. Okay, Ayush, fine. I got your message. I marked you present, beta. Yes, dear, you want to say something, Prabha?
Excuse me, ma'am.
Hanji, beta, bolo.
Yes, ma'am. I'm saying that, ma'am. Sometimes our technical glitch also comes. So, ma'am, sometimes our student, ma'am, कहीं का उसके absent भी लग जाती है. तो मैम रेगुलरिटी कभी कभार ऐसे भी तो ब्रेक हो जाती है हमेशा.
Sometimes से कुछ नहीं होता है बेटा. 75% attendance की बात हो रही है. Sometimes is not an issue. 75% if you have attendance till now, till we started the classes, तो कोई problem नहीं है. Sometimes is always acceptable. But there are students. Do you even know there is a boy Aryan Raj in biology? Have you ever seen him in the class?
No, ma'am.
Seen in
Okay.
physics
No,
lab,
ma'am.
okay, sweet.
I have not seen him. He's a new admission, and he is a bio student. I got to know when he gave his exam. Do you know the strength of your section of biology? How many children are there?
No,
No,
ma'am.
ma'am.
29 students are there.
30.
29 students are there in biology this time in class 11th. But you see all these new admissions. I have not even seen them once. I have no interaction with them at all. Most of them are
Ma'am,
new admissions.
even in English literature, only 14, 15 students come.
Ma'am, sometimes
some-
10, 9 also.
Ma'am, sometimes 9, 10, 11.
Yes, ma'am, in literature.
The strength is very less. These new admission students, there are many new admissions.
Very strict, ma'am. She always say, "Open your cameras. I want to see you all." That nobody can skip. Yes, skip.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you're not comfortable cameras on, huh? That is the reason?
No,
Yes,
ma'am.
No,
We are okay with that.
ma'am, we are
ma'am, we are
comfortable.
comfortable, ma'am, but
Ma'am, she just say when she's taking attendance, then only. Then most of
Yes,
us.
ma'am.
when we
Yes,
enter,
ma'am. We are
when
comfortable. Yes, ma'am.
Acha, when you enter, when you join the meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
just to see the
Yes,
presence.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am is a bit apprehensive because there were some issues in class 10th. Some students behaved
Yes,
very
ma'am.
badly.
Ma'am, I
Yes,
was
in the
also one of the victim, ma'am.
Hmm?
Ma'am, I was also one of the victim.
You are also one of the victim. How?
Ma'am, one day somebody else entered by my name na in PhD commerce class.
Oh, yes, yes, Prabhu,
You,
I remember.
yes,
That day in the staff
yes, ma'am.
meeting.
You were
Gaurav-
asking me about my artistic skills. That's why.
Actually, Gaurav sir introduced you like this. Gaurav sir in the staff meeting, he told us that very artistic child you have in biology, ma'am. He comes to my class and he paints all my entire screen with red and blue and green colors. Then he told me in detail about what it was. So I was wondering that Prabha behaves very nicely when it comes to biology class. He's so behaved properly, he behaves. How come he's showing all his artistic skills there in PHE only? Then we
Yes,
got
ma'am.
to know
That's why.
somebody else joined by his
Ma'am,
name.
from that day, I am now taking screenshots of my classes.
Oh, you're very cautious now. That is it. Children,
No, I
the
don't
thing
know.
is very simple. If you will study, it's good for you. Those who are not coming, it's entirely their problem. They'll suffer in class 12. We have done two categories of biomolecules. Very quickly, beta, what are they?
Carbohydrates and amino
Carbohydrates and amino
Carbohydrates and amino
Carbohydrates.
acids.
So we have 16 students in the class today. That means still so many of them are absent. Amino acids are very closely related to proteins. That is why I have picked up proteins to be done first. Amino acids, they join by peptide bonds and they form proteins. That means proteins are made up of what?
Amino acids.
Amino acids. So many amino acids will join and they will form a protein. But beta, whenever something joins, a bond has to be made. So the bond which is present between the amino acids when they form proteins are the peptide bonds. What do you call these bonds?
Peptide bonds.
Peptide bonds.
Let me first give you the introduction of proteins, though later we can discuss the structure. The word protein comes from the word proto, which means prime importance, very important. So the word protein comes from the word proto, which means very important. Since these biomolecules are very important, that is why we call them as proteins. The other name of proteins is polypeptides. So we have another name of protein. What is the other name of proteins?
Polypeptide.
Polypeptide.
And the word protein comes from the word proto, which means
Prime importance.
prime importance. Actually, amino acids were studied by a scientist. His name was Mulder, but the term protein was given by Berzelius. So generally, you will find in books Berzelius' name is written. In some books, you will find both the names, Mulder also, Berzelius also. So don't worry. All the entire study of the molecules of amino acids was done by Mulder. But the term proteins, because he realized that they're very important for us, so he called this, it was Berzelius who gave these molecules the name as proteins. So whenever we'll talk about proteins, we'll remember about two people. One is Mulder, the second is
Berzelius.
Berzelius. When we say the term was given by Berzelius only, but the entire study of how they behave, why they are important, it was done by Mulder. But the term, if I talk about the term, then it was given by Berzelius, and he gave this term protein because they are proto, they are very important for us. Just keep in mind what are proteins. They are polypeptides. I just told you proteins. The other name is what? Polypeptides. So they may be one polypeptide or they may be many polypeptides. We have got different kind of proteins. They could be only one polypeptide or they could be many polypeptides. If there are many polypeptides, then many amino acids basically, then which bonds will be present in them?
Peptide bonds.
Peptide bonds.
So we are doing some common characteristic features of all proteins जो सब में मिलेंगे, whether it is one protein वाला or it is more polypeptide वाला protein. These features बेटा आपको सब में common मिलेंगे. Number one, it will have peptide bonds. Number two, the molecules are larger. If you compare them to other biomolecules, they are larger in size. And they have high molecular weight also, and they are made up of many amino acids. So these are the four characteristic जो सब में मिलेंगे. They have got which kind of bonds?
Peptide bonds.
Peptide bonds.
Peptide bonds.
And if you compare the size with other molecules, तो ये थोड़े बड़े होते हैं या छोटे होते हैं बाकियों से?
Larger.
Larger.
And obviously अगर larger हैं तो molecular weight कैसा होगा?
High molecular weight.
Higher molecular weight.
And we said that they are made up of what? They are made up of amino acids.
Amino acids.
Let us talk about the classification now. When I started with polypeptide, I told you या तो एक polypeptide होगा या बहुत सारे होंगे. So we are going to classify the protein. The first classification is based on the number of polypeptides. We are doing classification of proteins, and the first classification is based on what? Number of polypeptides. If your protein is made up of only one peptide, it is called as monomeric protein. What is this protein called as?
Monomeric.
Monomeric protein.
Mono means one and meric over here means one peptide. So अगर आपके protein में सिर्फ एक ही peptide chain है, then we are going to call it as what? We are going to call it as monomeric protein. And the best example is lysozyme. Lysozyme. This is found in your saliva and tears. This enzyme, this protein, lysozyme, you will find it where? In the saliva and in the tears. We have another category of proteins, beta, जिसमें बहुत सारे polypeptides होते हैं. So if your protein is made up of many polypeptides, it is called as multimeric proteins. What are these proteins called as?
Multimeric.
Example, hemoglobin. Hemoglobin में जो globin वाला part है, जो protein part है, that is which kind of a protein? That is your multimeric protein. So if I talk about the globin part of hemoglobin, it has 2 alpha chains and 2 beta chains. So total कितनी chains हो गई polypeptide chains?
4.
4. Because it has got 2 alpha chains and 2 beta chains. So total in globin part of hemoglobin?
4.
4. तो बेटा आप उसको किस में रखोगे? मोनोमेरिक या फिर मल्टीमेरिक?
Multimeric.
Multimeric.
Similarly, when we talk about insulin, when you'll study in class 12th, we have in detail about the structure of insulin. So when your insulin is active, it has 2 chains, but when it is in inactive form, it has 3 chains of polypeptides. The inactive form of insulin is called proinsulin. Inactive form of insulin is called proinsulin, and उसमें 3 chains होती हैं. फिर जब वो active होती है तो एक chain हट जाती है, and we just have 2 chains. So whether it is 2 chains or it is 3 chains, whether it is the active form of insulin or inactive form of insulin, आप इसको किस में रखेंगे बेटा? Monomeric or multimeric?
Multimeric.
Multimeric.
Okay, Shali, let's do very quickly. We were talking about proteins. The word protein comes from the word proto, which means
Prime importance.
this term was introduced by, name the person, starts from B.
Virgilius.
So when we have the word proteins, protein word, we have another name for protein. What can we call them as?
Polypeptide.
So they could have one polypeptide chain or they could have many polypeptide chains. But if I talk about the common features, so सब बड़े होते हैं size में, they all have peptide bonds, the molecular weight is high. And when we did classification on the number of polypeptides, we got how many kinds of proteins?
2.
Two. If your protein is made up of only one kind of peptide chain, then it is known as
Monomeric
Monomeric.
protein.
monomeric. Example is your lysozyme protein, which is found in which part of the body or which secretion of your body?
Saliva and tears.
Yes. And if your protein is made up of many polypeptide chains or more than one polypeptide chain, then it is known as which protein?
Multimeric protein.
Very good. Multimeric protein. I just did 2 examples of multimeric proteins with you. One is the globin part of hemoglobin. It has got how many alpha chains?
2.
2 alpha chains. And how many beta chains?
2.
इसका मतलब total how many chains beta?
4 chains.
Yes, total 4 chains are there. And if it is total 4 chains, that means it is which kind of a protein? Monomeric or multimeric?
Multimeric.
Multimeric.
Then let's have one more example of a multimeric protein, that is insulin. What is it for insulin? What is proinsulin?
Inactive form of
Inactive stage of insulin.
Yes, inactive form of insulin is what we call as proinsulin. So let's do this very quickly. When we have the inactive stage, it has got 3 chains, but when insulin comes in the active stage, it has got 2 chains. So बेटा चाहे 3 chains or 2 chains, हम लोग कौन सी category में रखेंगे इनको? Monomeric or multimeric? Multimeric. Everybody is clear about the first classification of proteins on the number of polypeptides? How many categories of proteins?
2.
2 categories. Okay. Chaliye, let us move on to the second kind of classification. There are some proteins which are called first class proteins or complete proteins. We have another category of proteins which are known as first class proteins, or the other name is complete proteins. Why do we call them as complete proteins, beta? Because they have all the essential and the non-essential amino acids. Sub, whether it is essential or non-essential, they contain all the amino acids. These kind of proteins are known as complete proteins, or the other name for complete proteins is
First class.
First class
protein.
and the example is animal proteins, that is meat and fish. So if a person is non-vegetarian, a person is taking meat and fish, then his diet is sufficient. He's getting all the essential amino acids and the non-essential amino acids. Okay, extra alag se bahar se koi protein intake is not important or not essential for such an individual who's a non-vegetarian. Who's a non-vegetarian. So animal proteins, beta, they are all which kind of proteins? Complete proteins, or what is the name?
First class proteins.
First class proteins.
Now we come to the second category of proteins. These are second class proteins or incomplete proteins. Second class proteins or incomplete proteins. They lack some amino acid. या तो essential होगा तो non essential वाले नहीं होंगे. Non essential होगा तो essential नहीं होंगे. Some amino acids are always lacking. And the example of the second class proteins are the plant proteins. Okay, what are they? Plant proteins. That is why vegetarian people have to always add on some extra protein diet. They need to add on something which gives them proteins. This has to be done by which kind of people? Vegetarian or non-vegetarians?
Vegetarian.
Vegetarian.
Because they need to have something, an extra additional diet for proteins, because what they are eating is plant proteins, and plant proteins are incomplete proteins. They either have essential or non-essential. So the second category or the second classification of proteins was based on their content, which kind of amino acids they have. If they contain both the types, are essential and non-essential, we will call them as which class of proteins, beta?
First class proteins.
First
First class
class.
proteins. And the example was which proteins?
Animal proteins.
Animal protein.
Animal
And
proteins.
second class proteins and incomplete proteins, some they have, some they lack some amino acids, and the example is which proteins? Plant proteins.
Plant proteins.
Very good. We have done two classification. पहला वाला classification किस basis पर करा था बेटा?
Number of
Number-
polypeptides.
Number of
Number of
Number of
peptide
polypeptides.
bonds.
Polypeptides. Very good. Number of polypeptides. How many categories we had in that?
Two
Two.
categories.
Two.
Two categories. Tell me the names. कौन सी दो categories थी?
Monomeric and multimeric.
Multimeric.
Very good. Second classification जो हमने करा proteins, that was based on what?
Amino acids.
Yes, the composition, the amino acid composition. How many categories we had in that?
Two.
Two.
The complete proteins or the first class proteins, and which was the second category?
Second class proteins or incomplete proteins.
Proteins. Keep listening carefully. आगे चलते जाएंगे and then we'll keep revising also जो हमने पहले पढ़ लिया. Now we're going to do classification on the basis of structure. The first is the primary structure or the primary protein. देखो बेटा एक सिंपल सी लीनियर चेन है. आप ये देखो A लिखा है मैंने. What does AA stand for over here?
Amino acid.
Amino acid.
So if you see it's a long linear chain and इनके बीच में जो bonds हैं, which bonds are these?
Peptide bond.
Peptide bonds. So when I say primary structure, we have a long linear chain. Linear means कोई branch नहीं निकली है, कोई coiling नहीं है, कोई intertwining नहीं है, एक दूसरे से कहीं उलझ नहीं रहे हैं. Simple linear chain है. And the amino acids are bonded by which bond?
Peptide bond.
Peptide bond.
Normally, इनके बारे में याद रखना है that they are the non-functional kind of proteins. Or you could understand it that this is the first stage of protein formation. Whenever protein formation starts, ये बेटा first stage होती है. पहले amino acid सब अलग अलग पड़े होते हैं. सबसे पहले ऐसी एक chain बनती है, linear chain. So this is the first stage of protein formation. You know on which organelle protein formation starts? Which organelle proteins are made?
Ribosomes.
Endoplasmic reticulum.
Yes, it is ribosomes. They are present there. So जब ribosome में protein होगा तो वो ऐसा दिखेगा, ऐसा. If you'll see, this is the simplest structure of the protein. बाद में थोड़ा बहुत modifications होते हैं and we get different kind of protein. So this is the primary structure of a protein, where you have a long linear chain of amino acids connected by which bond?
Peptide bond.
Peptide bond.
Peptide bond.
Peptide.
That means बेटा primary structure में तो एक ही bond है. कौन सा bond है आपका?
Peptide bond.
Peptide bond.
Peptide bond.
And normally, very good. Normally ये सब non-functional होते हैं. However, इसमें एक exception होता है and that is insulin. Insulin is a primary protein, but it is functional. I just told you ये first stage होता है तो ये non-functional होते हैं. इस stage पे इनका कोई function as such perform कर नहीं पाते हैं. बाद में कुछ modifications होते हैं तब ये functional हो जाते हैं. So primary proteins or the primary structure of proteins, they are non-functional. However, there is one exception, which is a primary protein, but वो functional है. And what is that exception?
Insulin.
Insulin.
So we are doing the third kind of classification of proteins, which is based upon the structure. The first kind of protein which we are doing is the primary protein or the primary structure, जिसमें एक long chain, straight chain है amino acids का, which is connected by which bonds?
Peptide bond.
Peptide bond.
Peptide bonds. We can say that this is the first stage of protein formation. अभी ये इतने active नहीं होते हैं, so we call them as non-functional. However, there is one, again from competition point of view, there is one primary structure protein which is functional, and that is
Insulin.
Insulin.
That is
Insulin.
insulin. Okay. Let us go on to the secondary. बेटा इसका structure देख लो एक बार. AAA straight bonds. We have a peptide. And bond is only which bond? Peptide bond. ये जरूर
Peptide
याद
bond.
रखिएगा. Now let's move on to the second one, the secondary protein. Here we have one more bond coming in the scene, that is hydrogen bond. पहले अभी तक एक ही bond था. Which bond was that?
Peptide bond.
Peptide bond.
Peptide bond.
Peptide bonds. So चलिए इसको ऐसे imagine करते हैं. ठीक है? See, this is a long chain of peptides and these are the amino acids. ये जो dots हैं, dots, आप पहले इसको ऐसे देखो. This is your straight chain. Okay? अब ये sides वाले amino acids पास में आ जाएंगे. They'll come closer and they will make hydrogen bonds. जैसे आप एक ऐसे समझ लो, you take a thread, उसको बिल्कुल straight रखो and then you fold the thread into curls. Just imagine what I'm trying to tell you. Take a long white thread and with a black pen make dots on it. Okay, or you can take a strip of paper, thin strip of paper. उसके ऊपर black dots लगा लो. That is what I'm trying to do. It's a coil structure over here of this is your polypeptide chain. See, this is your polypeptide chain. What are these dots representing, children? Amino acids. What are they
Amino
representing?
acids.
हाँ. तो बेटा ये तो स्ट्रेट चेन थी. अब हमने इसको रोल कर दिया, कर्ल शेप में लेकर के आ गए, ऐसे वाला हेलिकल स्ट्रक्चर. दिस स्ट्रक्चर इज कॉल्ड व्हाट स्ट्रक्चर? हेलिकल स्ट्रक्चर. अगर हम इसको हेलिकल कर देंगे तो ये वाला अमाइनो एसिड इसके पास आ जाएगा. Isn't it? आप एक स्ट्रिप ऑफ पेपर लेके उसको फोल्ड करते हो तो वो पास में आएंगे, तो ब्लैक डॉट्स विल कम टुगेदर व्हेन यू रोल देम. आई ट्राई टू एक्सप्लेन इट लाइक दिस टू यू. दिस इज अ हेलिकल पॉलीपेप्टाइड चेन. ये जो डॉट्स आपको दिख रहे हैं बेटा, ये डॉट्स क्या हैं आपके? दे आर ऑल अमाइनो एसिड्स. अगर स्ट्रेट है तो एक दूसरे से दूर दूर है, लेकिन अगर इसको कॉइल कर दिया तो ये पास आ जाएंगे दूर, एंड इनके बीच में एक और बॉन्ड बन जाएगा, एंड दैट बॉन्ड इज व्हाट वी कॉल एज व्हिच बॉन्ड? हाइड्रोजन बॉन्ड. व्हिच बॉन्ड इज
हाइड्रोजन.
दिस? हाइड्रोजन. तो बेटा दो बॉन्ड्स हो गए. एक तो ये अमाइनो टू अमाइनो ऑलरेडी था ही, जब ये पॉलीपेप्टाइड चेन बनी होगी तो एक बॉन्ड तो पहले से ही है, ये जो दिख रहा है आपको इसमें. दिस बॉन्ड वाज व्हिच बॉन्ड? पेप्टाइड बॉन्ड. बट जब ये हेलिक्स शेप में आया तो अमाइनो एसिड्स पास पास आ गए, जैसे फर्स्ट एंड लास्ट हैव कम क्लोजर टू ईच अदर, तो इनके बीच में एक और बॉन्ड बनेगा. फर्स्ट एंड लास्ट के बीच में वैसे तो कोई बॉन्ड नहीं है इसमें, आप देखोगे फर्स्ट एंड लास्ट का आपस में कोई बॉन्ड दिख रहा है इन दिस स्ट्रेट चेन?
No.
No,
ma'am.
ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Isn't it? Because it's a linear structure. लेकिन इसको अगर हम कॉइल कर देंगे, ऐसे हेलिकल स्ट्रक्चर आ जाएगा, तो ये क्लोजर आ जाएंगे, ये वाला अमाइनो एसिड, ये वाला अमाइनो एसिड, एंड वी विल हैव मोर बॉन्ड्स फॉर्म्ड बिटवीन देम. इन दोनों के बीच में तो ऑलरेडी पेप्टाइड बॉन्ड है ही, फर्स्ट एंड सेकंड के बीच में, सेकंड एंड थर्ड के बीच में भी है, लेकिन फर्स्ट एंड फोर्थ पार्ट्स में आ गए, क्योंकि जब आप इसे रोल करोगे तो फर्स्ट एंड फोर्थ क्लोजर आ जाएंगे. So you will have one more bond between them. What is that bond? That is your hydrogen
H bond. Hydrogen.
Very good. The hydrogen bond. So secondary proteins में how many bonds are there?
Two.
Two bonds.
Two bonds.
Adjacent amino acids के बीच में peptide bond. When I say adjacent मतलब साथ वाले. जैसे first and second के बीच में, second and third के बीच में, आप यहाँ पे देखिए dots में, first and second is bonded to each other, second and third is bonded to each other, third and fourth भी आपस में bonded है. These dots are your amino acids. So what was the bond between them? Normal peptide bond. लेकिन जब हम इसको coil करेंगे तो first and fourth भी close आ जाएंगे. So जिसमें normal linear structure में कोई bond नहीं बन रहा था, but here you will have a bonding between the first and the fourth, and that would be which kind of a bond, children?
Hydrogen bond.
Hydrogen bond.
Hydrogen bond. So primary structure, there were only one type of bonds, and they were
Peptide
Peptide
bonds.
bond.
Peptide bond.
Peptide bonds.
Yes, peptide bonds. And in secondary structure, we have two types of bonds. What are they?
Peptide and hydrogen.
Hydrogen
Peptide bond and
peptide
hydrogen bond.
Peptide bonds and hydrogen bond. And such a structure is known as helical structure, or we also call it as alpha helix. Such a structure is known as alpha helix, and the structure is known as helical. ये linear था बेटा, ये जो ऊपर पड़ा था ये कैसा था? Linear. अब ये coiled हो गया, curled हो गया, so this is a helix structure. Example is keratin protein. Which is the example for this? Keratin protein.
Keratin protein.
Have you heard about keratin? Does someone know where in the body, which part
Ma'am,
you have
nails.
keratin protein?
Ma'am, nails.
Yes,
Hairs.
nails, hair.
Hair.
Very good, very good. देखो बेटा, हाइड्रोजन बॉन्ड फॉर्मेशन मैंने समझाने की कोशिश करी है विद डिफरेंट स्टेप्स. This is your polypeptide chain. Okay. And what are these dots over here?
Amino
Amino
acid.
acid.
Amino
Amino
acids.
acids. If you see amino acids are also joined to each other, तब ये एक long chain बन रही है आपकी. And ये कौन से bonds होंगे आपस में? Amino to amino?
Peptide bonds.
Peptide bond.
ओके, तो एक तो ये बॉन्ड हो गया हमारा बेटा, पेप्टाइड बॉन्ड्स. अब नीचे चलते हैं. अब फर्स्ट एंड फोर्थ के बीच में, अब ये बीच के मैंने हटा दिए हैं ये वाले आपके लिए क्लियर कि अब इसके एंड इसके बीच में बॉन्डिंग हो रही है, फर्स्ट एंड फोर्थ. एंड दीज बॉन्ड्स जो बन रहे हैं, दीज आर व्हाट? These are the hydrogen bonds between amino acids of the same chain. Can you see? Hydrogen bonds are formed, but they are formed between the amino acids of the same chain. कोई दूसरी चेन तो नहीं है ना बेटा इसमें?
No, no.
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Yes. We cannot see, but ये दिख रहा है कि hydrogen bonds are being formed, but they are being formed between amino acids of the same chain. But अब ये वाला देखो, अब ध्यान से देखो, एक ये चेन है हमारी ऐसे टेढ़ी वाली, और एक ये वाली चेन है. Again there will be two bonds बेटा, amino to amino peptide bonds, and इसका amino acid इसके amino acid से भी जुड़ जाएगा. By which bonds? What are these bonds called as?
Hydrogen
Hydrogen
bond.
Hydrogen bond.
These are hydrogen bonds by coming closer. But what is the difference between ये ऊपर वाला hydrogen bond and ये वाला hydrogen bond? Tell me, देख के बताइए.
मैम उसमें वो
Ma'am,
सेम चेन में ज्वाइन हो रहे थे एंड
ma'am, in first it is in
Yes.
same chain and in
Yes, both of you are absolutely correct. That first वाले में the hydrogen bonding was between amino acids of the same chain. And second structure में the bonding is between amino acids of different chains. पहले वाले का नाम क्या बताया था आपको? Alpha helix structure. What is the structure called as? Alpha.
alpha helix.
But अगर ऐसा कुछ दिखता है, then this is beta pleated structure. What is the structure known as?
बीटा
Beta
Beta
pleated
pleated structure.
If you see silk fibers, you will find this kind of a structure. Silk protein, जो आपको proteins in silk you will find this kind of a structure. So basically, how many bonds will be there in beta pleated structure?
टू
Two. And how many bonds were there in alpha helix structure?
Two.
Bonds बेटा, bonds तो 2 ही हैं. Okay,
bonds.
उसमें भी peptide and hydrogen, इसमें भी peptide and hydrogen. But the difference between alpha and beta, what difference did you find? Alpha में hydrogen bonds are formed between amino acids of the same chain or
Same
different
chain.
chain?
Same chain.
Same chain.
But when we say beta pleated structure, that means the bonding is between amino acids of how many chains?
Different chains.
Different chains.
And specify 2 different chains. Okay, specify the word, ये याद रखिएगा that how many chains are there? 2 different chains are there. So everybody knows the linear structure. How many bonds are there in linear structure?
वन
One.
One.
Only one was there. Then I came to this secondary structure. In secondary structure, we had 2 bonds. Here, there could be 1 chain or there could be 2 chains. So secondary proteins में बेटा 2 तरह के bonds बनेंगे. One is hydrogen and the next is your peptide bond, of course. एक में इसमें alpha helix या फिर beta helix. ये दोनों secondary structure में ही आ जाएंगे. Now I'm coming to tertiary proteins because 2 chains थी ना यहाँ पे. So we're going to call it as secondary proteins. Now come to 3 tertiary proteins. Okay. Chali, let's do this very quickly. Third, 3 chains come closer. एक chain ऐसे थी, दूसरी वो कट करती हुई ऐसे चली गई. Okay, this is your straight chain. आप cursor देखो. This is your first chain. Second chain is cutting this and third chain ऐसे. एक vertical था, एक horizontal था और एक दोनों जहाँ पे दोनों कट कर रहे थे, एक उसके बीच में diagonal आ गया. So how many chains are there together?
Three.
3.
3 chains. Such a kind of a protein will be known as a tertiary protein structure or a tertiary structure of a protein. अब if you remember amino acids का हमने structure करा था. Okay, we had an OH group, we had an NH2 group. How many of you remember this amino acid structure?
यस मैम
Yes, ma'am.
चलो देख लेते हैं. So just to give you an example, supposing ये मान लेते हैं बेटा कि इस chain में we have OH group over here. Okay, यहाँ पे एक OH group है. And इस chain के end पे we have a NH2 group. अब बेटा अगर इसके बीच में bond बनेगा दोनों के बीच में, तो कोई ऐसा ही तो सब्सटेंस यहाँ आ सकता है जो OH से भी बॉन्ड बना सके एंड NH2 से भी बॉन्ड बना सके. Any XYZ cannot come here. Why it cannot come here? Because if it comes here, I made a box over here, if you can understand. This box, the substance should be making bonds with both. So between OH and NH2, we cannot have anything. कुछ भी नहीं आ सकता है. We need to have a substance जो दोनों से bonding कर सके. It can bind with OH also, it can bind with NH2 also. So such kind of proteins are said to be specifically functional or specific proteins. What are these proteins called as?
Specific proteins.
Specific proteins.
Specific protein.
क्योंकि इनके बीच में एक एक्टिव साइट है. You got OH over here, you got NH2 over here. This ये जो बीच की जगह खाली है जहाँ पे बॉन्ड बनेगा, this site is known as active site. But active site पे सिर्फ वही चीज आ सकती है which is specific in a sense. It can make a bond with OH also, it can make a bond with NH2 also. That is why tertiary proteins are called as specific proteins. What is the other name for tertiary proteins?
Specific proteins.
Specific protein.
They are called specific proteins.
Ma'am,
Let's
in
come
these
to-
protein.
Why can't we
Excuse me.
have a COOH group?
Yes, beta.
Ma'am, why can't we have a COOH group? Carboxyl
And
group
beta,
in
I
these?
said I'm giving an example. It could be anything. यहाँ पे आप COH रख लो, तो भी तो हमें specific ही चाहिए होगा ना. I just told you कि I'm just giving you one example. अगर आप यहाँ पे COH रखते हो, तो भी बेटा बात वही आएगी. Active site पे वही substance bind करेगा, which can bind to both COH and NH2. Anything and everything cannot come here. This was just an example. You know it's a derivative of what? Amino acids are derivatives of?
Methane.
Yes.
Methane.
Methane. So you know about the structure. So I just gave you an example. You can always replace this and see. But बात वही रहेगी कि whether it is COH or it is OH or it is NH2, the active site will have a specific substance, and that specific substance will be one which can bind to this group also and can bind to this group also. That is the reason that these proteins are known as specific proteins. Like in enzymes.
Ma'am, in these proteins there is no